Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really trying to cut through all that noise, the confusing and sometimes guilt-inducing advice around metabolic health, weight, and diet. If you feel like you're doing all the right things, but your body just isn't playing ball, well, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, and we've got some great perspectives today. We're synthesizing insights from two key experts, Leslie Lee, who's a registered dietitian working with kids on metabolic health at Swedish Healthcare, and also Dr. Beverly Chang, a physician at Weill Cornell, who's triple board certified in internal medicine, endocrinology, metabolism, and obesity medicine. So really deep expertise there.
And they're both tackling this really tough question, sort of challenging decades of thinking. Is managing your health and weight really just about willpower, like gritting your teeth? Or is it actually more about our biology and this environment we live in that's just flooded with hyper-palatable foods, setting us up for a struggle? We're going to get into why change is genuinely so hard, especially for families. Okay, let's start with that root cause. It needs a big reframe, looking at the typical American diet. Leslie Lee talks about this from her own experience growing up with the Midwestern diet, the standard American diet or SAD.
Right, and if you look back, historically, that diet was just a constant flow of high glycemic carbs and sugar. We're talking really specific things people remember. Things like Jell-O molds with marshmallows, sheet cake everywhere, tater tots, huge amounts of soda, and just tons of starch like cream of wheat, pasta, bread at basically every meal. Leslie Lee actually mentioned feeling, sick and fatigued herself by age 8, realizing even as a kid that how she felt wasn't really normal.
And that personal story really clicks with what doctors are saying now. Dr. Chang she's very clear that we need to stop seeing weight gain as some kind of personal failing. She firmly categorizes obesity as a chronic medical disease. It's biology, but it's been tragically misunderstood and, frankly, stigmatized.
Absolutely, and that's the core message Leslie Lee shares with families who feel, totally defeated. She tells them straight up, you are not the problem, your child isn't misbehaving, you're not broken. The issue is our brains are wired to seek energy and reward, and they're just responding normally, exactly as they should, to what she calls a toxic environment that's literally designed for hyperpalatability, designed to make us eat more.
And this obesogenic life, it isn't just fast food or packaged snacks, right? We also have to think about homemade comfort foods, maybe high-carb Italian dishes, lots of traditional baking. They drive the same response. Plus, you layer on stress eating, which really ramped up during COVID for a lot of people. It all adds up to an environment that just promotes storing fat. It's systemic, baked into our culture.
So to really get it, we have to move past that high school physics idea of weight. Dr. Chang really pushes back on the simple calories in, calories out model, thinking of the body like it's just a basic calculator. The human body isn't a closed system like that. It's dynamic, it's adaptive, it reacts hormonally to what you put in.
Okay, so this brings us to the biology underneath it all. Dr. Chang uses this great analogy that totally reframes weight gain. She says obesity isn't caused by eating too much. It's more that the body's weight thermostat is set too high. Scientists call it the lipostat, or body weight set point.
Yes, and that distinction is huge. It's the environmental signals, the super tasty food, the stress that crank that thermostat up. And once that set point is higher, your biology kicks in. Your body actually makes you hungrier and might even slow down your metabolism to defend that new higher weight. So it's your hormones and that set point driving the eating, not some lack of discipline.
And that ties right into blood sugar, doesn't it? We hear about insulin a lot, but how does it fit here?
Well, insulin's main job is storage. It's an anabolic hormone. It basically tells your body, hey, put this energy away for later. So if you're constantly eating high-carb foods, you get this roller coaster of insulin levels, highs and lows. And that means your body is constantly getting these strong signals to store energy as fat, especially if you're not burning it off immediately through muscle activity.
And the really sad consequence of this high-carb, low-nutrient pattern, is what Leslie Lee sees every day. She says nearly every patient she sees, it doesn't matter their size, underweight, severely obese, whatever, they're actually malnourished.
Yeah, that's a really stark finding. It's not always about too many calories overall. It's that the high-carb, often processed foods push out the essential stuff, the protein, the healthy fats, vitamins, minerals that the body desperately needs. Leslie Lee mentioned something like 90% of her pediatric patients had protein deficiencies. That's huge. And if kids are constantly running low on these basic building blocks, she said it really doesn't bode well for the future of human beings. It's quite concerning.
Okay, so if the environment's working against us and our biology is sort of fighting back, what can families actually do? Leslie Lee must have some practical strategies, right? We need tactics.
Definitely. The first thing is understanding the difference in how foods make us feel. Leslie Lee uses this comparison. Reaching for chips or ice cream gives you this massive dopamine hit, right? That instant mental reward.
Yeah.
But eating something like salmon or broccoli, well, that gives a much more subtle, long-term feel-good effect. That's more tied to actual nutrition, serotonin.
Yeah.
The brain gets so used to that big dopamine rush that it can literally take weeks of eating healthier for your body to even start noticing the real subtle benefits of the nutrient-dense food.
That makes it so much harder. Which leads to this idea she called the popsicle problem. She advises families, first off, stop using food as a reward or punishment altogether. But here's the key tactic. Removing the tempting, hyper-palatable food from the house is often way easier than trying to constantly negotiate or swap it for something healthier.
Exactly. Why? Because if that tempting thing is there, the parent has to say no, like limitless times, as she put it. And that just creates stress, arguments, and eventually someone gives in. If you just remove the item, you remove the daily battle, it lowers the stress level in the whole house.
And it's not just about food in the pantry, is it? Leslie Lee also talks about the broader culture of instant gratification, this sort of dopamine addiction, constantly checking phones, always needing snacks or treats. She gave a specific example for families struggling to get kids moving. Just set a hard rule. Turn off the Wi-Fi from, say, 3:20 to 4:30 p.m.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear boundary. The expectation is simple. For that hour, you move. Maybe it's a family dance party. Maybe you go to the playground. It might be tough at first, she acknowledged, but it breaks that cycle of screen time and constant snacking, and it directly encourages the physical activity needed to use energy properly.
And finally, cooking. We have to talk about cooking. For kids, cooking together isn't just learning a skill. Leslie Lee calls it a form of connection. It's actually shown to help prevent depression, and it takes pressure off parents, too. She suggested making it fun, like making yogurt bark with fruit, or even fermenting sauerkraut as a cool science experiment.
Okay, shifting back to the science for a moment. There's this really critical link that often gets missed. The connection between low blood sugar hypoglycemia and developing chronic diseases later on. The Hypoglycemia Support Foundation updated their questionnaire, and they found something really significant.
Right, and this is a number you really want to hold on to, 2/3. That's 66% of people who eventually develop type 2 diabetes said they experienced symptoms of reactive hypoglycemia, those blood sugar crashes after eating before they got their diabetes diagnosis.
Yeah, it confirms something doctors have suspected for a long time, but maybe dismissed. Leslie Lee's explanation of the mechanism makes sense. Hypoglycemia means you release too much insulin for the sugar load you just ate. You're in a state of insulin excess. If you do that over and over, repeatedly, your cells eventually start resisting the insulin signal. They develop insulin resistance. And that's the stepping stone right into type 2 diabetes.
It connects back to what Dr. Seal Harris, who discovered hyperinsulinemia way back in the 1940s, said, "The low blood sugar of today is the diabetes of tomorrow." The clue was there all along.
And Dr. Chang adds another layer here, which he calls the symptom gap. A lot of people feel that blood sugar roller coaster the highs, then feeling awful, crashing, but their blood sugar might not actually dip below the official clinical threshold for hypoglycemia, which is 70. So medically, there isn't really a disease name for just feeling constantly hangry, irritable, wiped out. But these same people almost always report feeling way better when they cut out the refined sugar.
Okay, we have to touch on the big thing in metabolic health right now. The GLP-1 drugs, like semaglutide. What's Dr. Chang's take on these as an endocrinologist?
Well, her view is balanced. She acknowledges that for certain patients, they've been truly transformative, especially for people who struggle with constant food noise in their head, or those who genuinely say they've never felt full before in their life. For them, she says, it can be like an awakening, a kind of quietness and peace around food they've never experienced.
That idea of quietness is interesting. It points to how they work, right? Dr. Chang emphasized they primarily affect hunger and fullness signal satiety. They act on hormones mainly in the gut and the brain.
Exactly. And that mechanism brings us back around to behavior, interestingly. We know GLP-1 receptors are also found in the brain's dopamine reward system, but we need more research there. We don't fully understand yet how these meds influence that dopamine response specifically. But it might explain why some people report less interest in other addictive behaviors too, like gambling or drinking while they're taking them. It's an area to watch.
So pulling all this together, what's the big takeaway for you listening?
I think the core message is that this journey to metabolic health, it's less about just forcing yourself with willpower. like it's some kind of moral test, and much more about understanding your own unique biology, your set point driven by the environment, and then actively working to redesign that environment around you to support your health, not fight against it.
Yeah, and we saw clear examples from Leslie Lee's work. When families set clear limits on those hyper-palatable foods and shift the focus to things like cooking together, actual connection, people are just happier,
Yeah.
calmer, more connected. It's a real benefit beyond just the scale.
And finally, thinking about that really powerful statistic, two-thirds of people with type 2 diabetes had hypoglycemia symptoms. First, it leaves us with a crucial question for you. If your current way of eating often leaves you feeling irritable, crashing, maybe hangry, what preventative questions should you be asking yourself right now about your own metabolic future? Something to think about.